grab the fuel nozzle and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of the Truck Stops Here, brought to you by NATSO. Now, here's your host, Amy Toner.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Truck Stops Here. I'm your host, Amy Toner, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Schulte. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Amy. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm on with you. It's a good day. You are listening to the Truck Stops Here, NATSO's podcast. NATSO is the National Trade Association for Truck Stops, and our mission is to advance their success. And this podcast is just one of the many ways we do that. Today, we're getting fancy. We're doing a cross pod with the Inconvenience podcast. At NATSO, we're big fans of host Frank Beard and Al Hebert. Hi, guys.
Hey, guys. How are you guys?
Good. Hey, Frank.
Hey, thanks for having us on the podcast.
All right. I'm going to tell them a bit about you guys before we dive in. Since 2011, Al has written the Gas Station Gourmet column for NACS magazine. He travels all over the U.S. learning about the industry. And Frank Beard is a Des Moines-based retail consultant, speaker, and writer. He currently serves as the director of Safe Shop, a certification program for store safety, and he also serves as the director of special projects at Convenience Store Decisions. And together, they host the Inconvenience podcast. So we asked them to come on today to talk about what they think is working and not working right now for C-stores, retailers, and truck stops. Whew. All right, guys. Well, let's talk about food service first. I know you guys mentioned that you've seen some companies trying some new things. What have you seen?
Well, I kind of focus on the small, individually owned, family-owned stores and travel centers. And, of course, the big thing right now is the pandemic. And what I've seen in a lot of places is, of course, depending on what state you're in, whether your dining room was shut down because of the pandemic, depending on what you were doing. And Frank and I know Frank has basically the same perspective, but certainly more global than me. But what I find people are doing is a lot of people are doing. I'm finding more and more kits out there. People have really good food, but it's not really working for delivery. And I'm finding places like that they're putting kits together to make their food so you can make it at home. And that's really cool. And what the other interesting thing, and I just spoke to someone at a travel center today about this, is what's not working. We may want to talk about that at length later. But what I'm stunned that curbside service has about a 2-week shelf life with everybody I've spoken to. And that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that's really stood out to me is I really try to pay attention to sort of outlier food service programs, not just who does it basic, but who really creates something that's, I like to say, craveable, caterable, and something you would drive out of your way to get. And it's interesting to me, one thing that's come on my radar this year is what's happening in the UK and specifically Northern Ireland. I don't know if any listeners follow the convenience retailers in Northern Ireland, but what they figured out with food service is just incredible. Morns Centra, I would ask everyone to Google that actually, Morans Centra. Mm-hmm. This is effectively a high-end fast casual restaurant, but when you talk to folks over there, I'll borrow a phrase from Scott Annan from the who works with a lot of retailers over there. But everyone eats and drinks. You can sell something to someone 3 times a day. I think there's this idea that convenience retailers, of course, want to appeal to a broad audience, but food service is really kind of the way to do that. Nobody wants to get up and eat food that's not high quality. Nobody wants to eat something that's not good. But these retailers over there, their stores aren't relying on tobacco in the way that they are in the United States. They've progressed so far away from smokes and cokes. I think it's a part of the world that's worth watching and definitely learning from. That's honestly, when the COVID travel restrictions are done, I'll be over there in a heartbeat to go do some retail tours.
I know Darren mentioned from his international travels that a lot of the convenience stores serve the food on like ceramic plates. Do they do that? Like nice?
Yeah, I got to say that the times that I've gone overseas to visit stores, I'm always impressed at little things that, maybe just aren't common around here that are quite standard in other markets. I think of a store I went to in Australia, Urbanista. they have some stores outside of Sydney, and their whole thing is they want to serve nice barista coffee. If anyone knows anything about the coffee market in Australia, they tend to think that their coffee is sort of the outlier in the world. And to be honest, it's pretty awesome, especially if you're into espresso-based drinks. But the thing is, Urbanista, I ordered, I think it was a meat pie. Al would know more about this than me, because I think in Louisiana, they claim to be the ones who created this, whereas I think the Australians claim the same thing.
That is correct, Frank.
Yeah, difference being in Louisiana, you're all deep frying them. I don't think that's quite standard.
We deep fry everything. Yes.
Yeah. But so I ordered, it wasn't a meat pie, but it had like spinach and feta, basically the same thing. They bring it over to me on a cutting board, like a nice cutting board, something that I wouldn't want to cut up in my own house. I'd probably just like leave it and probably never use it because it looked really nice. This looked really fancy. And the thing was, I think this was just a prepackaged item that was heated up. But I mean, you never know. They just paid attention to the presentation in a way that really stood out to me. And it was brought over to my table by the lady who was working behind the register. I mean, what a nice customer service touch. But then you come back to the US and you'll look at a sandwich in a convenience store. It may have been made fresh that day. It may be really fantastic, actually, but it's put in a crinkly plastic clamshell that just degrades, its image. And I really think, paying attention to that presentation, that's one area where I think a lot of retailers can really improve what they're doing.
Yeah, you're right. I see that too. And I'm hearing that, there's a great travel plaza here in Louisiana that have beautiful grab and go, like crawfish fettuccine, shrimp fettuccine. And really, I'd put the quality of this food up against any white linen restaurant you'll run into. And they're kind of packaging them a little different. I mean, it's still plastic. It's probably not very fancy, but I would think for kind of the way we are here in the deep South, it works for us. But I do think that, what Frank just described is wonderful. I'd like to see more of that. Well,
one thing I'll share too, there was a store in Australia I went to called Jack & Co. Last I checked, they had about 5 locations, but their whole thing is, 7-Eleven in Australia is really big for doing, last I was there, it's like dollar coffee. Great coffee, really cheap price. It's a good competitive edge for them. Jack & Co.'s approach is different. They said, I don't want to sell dollar coffee. I want to sell $5 coffee. And they've done a pretty fantastic job. But fresh food is logistically a little bit more difficult in that market for reasons. It's kind of a long story. But the point is, he made an effort to really get into fresh food. But when you go in, the first thing I saw in the store I went to is a cooler that had sandwiches and wedge boxes. But when you think of a sort of like that wedge box in a lot of retail settings, it looks kind of commercial, industrial, maybe like it came from like it's just mass produced. He took these wedge boxes that have the color of sort of butcher paper, and rather than affixing complicated labels to them, they just take a stamp that has the Jack & Co. logo. They stamp it on there. Not all of them are in the same position. They're a little off center, but it makes it look boutique, handmade, and which it really is. But that's the point. It reinforces the fact that someone in that store made that sandwich that day and put it in the cooler. It's a little touch, but I got to tell you, it really goes a long way.
Darren, have you seen anyone in the U.S. that's doing that? Any of our members?
Yeah, I was going to quickly chime in about like the sin categories. For travel centers, we've been very fortunate. Like cigarettes and beer traditionally are not big performers for us, and we've had the benefit of other categories, and food service being one of them. What I have noticed, at least during the few trips I've made during the pandemic, is the travel centers that have had full service restaurants that have converted them into what I'm going to call like a commissary. Kind of going to Al's point, we've got members that are serving chicken Alfredo to go, or chicken Parmesan to go, or spaghetti to go. Those travel center operators that have been innovative and saying, look, I'm going to take my full service restaurant menu and convert it over to a grab and go type of program have done really well. So, we've got, as we've said before, we've got some travel centers out there that are doing just under, and this is a hard number to believe, but it's a real number, under $300,000 a month out of their delis. That's a month
Whoa.
out of their delis. And it's mind numbing. It's mind numbing to believe those types of numbers. And but again, as Frank said, as Al said, if you do something different, if you do something special, if you really pay attention to your customer, who he or she is, you can really do some great things in food service. So I expect the food service experience to get even better in travel centers as we get a lot of the more sophisticated convenience store operators moving into our space.
Yeah, I think so too. And actually, one thing I'll chime in and add on the subject of travel centers here. Something that really impressed me this year. I got to give a shout out to Robin from Greater Chicago I-55 Truck Plaza if she's listening, because the restrooms at that store are like in the top tier that I've ever seen. I flew back from Germany right before all the COVID travel restrictions came in, and my sister picked me up because she was in Chicago, and I thought, hey, it'd be fun to drive back to Iowa with her. So we stopped at Greater Chicago I-55 on the way back and went in to check out these new restrooms. I'd seen some pictures of them online. I got to tell you, these look like restrooms like a high-end club or something. I've never seen anything like it. My sister, of course, went in the women's restroom because I didn't want to be the weird person who goes in snapping pictures of restrooms.
Wow, thank you, Frank. I take that personally now.
I just had a feeling that could go
so
very
painful.
badly. So I told my sister, I said, hey, go in and get some pictures of this, take a video of it. She comes out and she's like, oh my God. She goes, I think those are the nicest restrooms I've ever seen. And she wouldn't stop talking about it for like the next hour when we're driving back. The tile kind of has like a sheen that reflects, just sort of like rainbow colors or just like the full spectrum. The lights kind of change color in there. It literally looks like a club. But it was sparkling clean, extremely modern. And the men's restrooms even had sort of more just like sort of nice wood finish, nice tile. To be quite honest, I think travel centers do have to deal with a certain stigma, just like convenience stores have that stigma of the dirty gas station that, in many cases not true anymore. But that's the kind of thing that really changes a person's impression and makes them think, hey, next time I'm on this interstate, I'm making a point to stop here.
Especially this year, we keep talking about the importance of cleanliness. So important.
Oh, absolutely. And, go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say, I'm curious for everyone's thoughts on how that's going to play out this next year. I mean, I don't know about you, but even when things are all said and done, I don't think I'm going to look at a touchscreen or a keypad the same ever again. It's just made me more of a germaphobe.
And it's a good idea to be that way. We ran a story. This university in England swabbed touchscreens in local fast food restaurants around London. And they came out with and this was before the pandemic, a really disturbing amount of scary bacteria on these things. And I wonder how it is now that people are a little more cognizant of washing their hands and using, hand sanitizer. But I think we ran this story mid-year last year, and it was really disturbing what they found on there. And, touchscreens, I haven't looked at them the same since then. And I agree with Frank that especially since the pandemic, people may take a different look at touchscreens.
I would circle back to, that comment that Frank made about how people are going to look at it as well, and say that I think a new standard has been set. And maybe the word standard is wrong. It's just an expectation. And it's something that we on our side have been talking a great deal about. I mean, the travel center industry in particular has shown that you can have immaculate restrooms. You can have immaculate, store counters free of debris, free of all junk. You can have incredibly clean food service areas. And I think an expectation has been set. So kind of like what Frank is saying, I don't think many of these things you can go backwards anymore. They're going to be the new expectation. So if Frank happens to go back to Robin's location and that restroom is not as clean as he saw it during the pandemic, I think that will sit differently with him, because we've, certainly travel center industry has proved that you can have really clean pumps. You can have really clean forecourts. You can do a lot of these safety things and sanitation things. So I think it's a new expectation, and I don't see it going away.
Well, and one thing I would add too is for any operators, please listen to your female customers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, sometimes I don't want to speak for all men, but sometimes what we're willing to put up with is maybe a little more than what maybe my wife would put up with. So, I guess when Robin showed me those pictures, I wasn't surprised to see that those restrooms were as nice as they are. And again, if you're ever in that way, check out that store, because I'm telling you, these are like top tier restrooms that I've ever seen, period. Not just in convenience stores and travel centers.
Amy, Darren, if you have operators out there who maybe are kind of on the line with what Frank said about paying attention to female customers, I had an operator tell me one day that she observed the sort of prehistoric hunter-gathering behavior of families as the male will get out of the SUV, go into the restroom, and then come out and see a conversation. If the men's room was clean, then the entire family would get out of the SUV and come inside and head straight to the restroom. If it was not, they drive off. So just like it was millions of years ago, the man goes in first, and if it's not suitable, the wife makes that decision to just drive on. So it's so key that they pay attention to the cleanliness of the restrooms, because this behavior, just like a million years ago when men were out there trying to find food, but the women are back there saying, I don't think that's going to work, and we're going to move on. So it's really important to do that, because, that's just, and look, I have 2 kids and a wife, and my wife she can tell you where every dirty restroom is between South Louisiana and Austin, Texas. She remembers them. They're burned upon her brain. So good Lord, man, keep your restrooms clean.
You know what? That's really interesting and particularly important for travel centers, Frank and Al. So I've done probably 100 plus reviews of stores. And in these reviews, we often talk to the customers, and female customers, specifically in travel centers, when you're traveling, have a lot of the say of why they pull over, right? So men, like when we're driving, as you said, we'll wait until the gas is empty almost, right? Or real close.
Right.
That doesn't happen with a female. She's concerned about the family. I have over 20 million views of the pictures I've posted about travel centers, and the number one things that are clicked on, it's usually a female customer. She's clicking on, what does the store look like, the outside? Do they have food? And what do the restrooms look like? So those are the top 3 pictures that are clicked on when I post these on these Google sites. So you're both correct, and it's really critical for travel centers to focus on the female customer.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, I've been married 25 years. I have not made a decision in 25 years. So women make the big decisions about that. Hey, the other thing, Darren, Amy, and Frank, I don't know if you've run across this, but I interviewed a guy a few years ago who told me that every 2 years he guts his restrooms. And Darren, I think when you and I were down here, we went into a travel center that had a restroom that needed a little bit of work. And what you find is that sometimes, if the restroom has not been completely refurbished, things begin to look worn, but they look dirty. And I actually went into a travel center restroom once, got a paper towel to see if I could clean the sink, and you're welcome for me cleaning that sink. But the sink was not dirty. It was just, it had been so used, it was completely worn and stained. So, if you run a travel center, if you run a C-store, you need to consider going into there and saying, okay, it's clean, but do I need to just gut this thing and every couple of years and start with, new lavatories, new faucets, things like that, because they're going to get worn to a point to where they're just going to look dirty, even though they're clean. A lot of wear and tear.
A lot of wear and tear on truck stops, for sure.
And it's worth it's worth the money to just gut it and refurb it.
All right, we're going to diverge a bit. Frank, you had shared with us an article you wrote about how fuel and convenience retailing are at a crossroads. And I think we can all agree that this has been happening for a long time, but COVID sped it up. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I recently wrote a 3-part series that I put out through Convenience Store Decisions with a friend of mine, Brandon Lawrence. He's a independent fuels consultant and data scientist. And we had just been on the phone a lot this summer, just just chatting about what's going on and trying to connect the dots on some things that we were noticing. And so we decided to write some articles together just to kind of put our thoughts out on what we were seeing. And here's kind of everything in a nutshell. I think the links might be shared with the episode page. Mm-hmm. If not, just send me a message on LinkedIn and I can send it to you. But the basic idea is this. So COVID-19, we think it was a dress rehearsal. And what I mean by that is this. I think very few people would disagree that at some point in the future, there was an expected drop in fuel demand. The internal combustion engine is going to continue to get increasingly more fuel efficient. Any growth in electrification by definition is going to lead to the erosion of the fuel customer base because most people will charge at home, even if half of them don't. And I'm just throwing that out as a number, but even if half of them didn't, that's still meaning half of the people are charging at home. So any growth in that is going to fragment the fuel customer base. Mm-hmm. COVID-19 kind of simulated some of these conditions by creating a drop in demand at the forecourt and a drop in transactions inside the store. I think this was offset a little bit by the fuel margins and the stock up behavior, but it was still kind of a test run for that future scenario. Kind of like in a strange way, the restaurant industry, I guess you could argue to a certain extent, is dealing with a similar sort of dynamic where the QSRs are thriving in this environment, but restaurants that didn't have off-premise solutions found themselves in a bit of a bind suddenly. So within fuel and convenience, I think it was a test run to see, okay, whose business model is prepared to thrive in an environment where you have less traffic coming into the forecourt. And on top of that, this was coming out of a time where the industry had really diverged over the past few years to see three business models really pull retailers into these three separate corners, meaning the consolidators, your 7-Elevens, your GPM investments, Circle K's, companies chasing scale and basically scaling that traditional convenience store model. You had the QSRs, the Sheetz and the Wawas of the world building food forward models that quite honestly are going to thrive with or without fuel. And then, of course, you had the merchant supported fuel canopies just doing high volume fuel cells parked in front of a store that could probably run that at a loss and be just fine. You know, the Costco's of the world, the Fleet Farms of the world, Sam's Club. For everyone else who hasn't really picked a side there, it kind of leaves you in a position where you don't really have a lot of competitive advantages. The advantages go to those three sides. However, there's a class of retailers out there, I'd call them boutique or bespoke retailers, small chains, single store operators that have just created such highly unique, differentiated businesses that they can go head to head with any of those. And I know we've all been in stores like that and can think of plenty, especially Al, who writes about that on a very regular basis. But the thing is, I think looking to the near future, differentiation is one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around conferences a lot, but it's really not a buzzword. I mean, it's literally going to be a survival strategy at some point. If you can't provide a compelling reason for someone to come to your store, this is the time when you need to start asking it, because there's a lot of stores in the industry, quite frankly, that if you remove their branding, you wouldn't even know where you're at, because they sell the same products as each other from the major CPG companies. I mean, that's fine, and that's been a model that's worked for a long time. But I think in the near future, you're going to see some structural challenges to that, because the advantages in that type of model belong to other types of retailers that have scale. And it's a long explanation, but that's basically what we wrote about. So the good thing, though, is the travel center industry. I got to be honest, the NATSO conference I spoke at the other year, I was just amazed by the quality of conversation I encountered at that entire conference. Like, travel center operators are always full of ideas. I mean, just always willing to try new things. And it's such a cool industry.
It's very competitive, and it's a much bigger business, I think, than people think. So it's a lot of really smart people in our industry. I
mean, many of the best ideas that I encounter are coming from travel centers. Like, I think of, I'm drawing a blank. It's early in the week, but early in the week. No, seriously, I don't know about any other listeners, but my internal clock has been broken since March and April when COVID started. It's thrown me off. But the thing is, when I think back to the mom-approved restrooms, gosh, which
Sap
retailer
Brothers?
was it? Oh, Sap Brothers. You know, like
Sap Brothers.
Like, that stuck with me. We went to the one in Harrisonville that's by the old Pyro City, which I used to go buy fireworks at. So I was surprised to see a shiny new Sapros there. My wife still talks about that store. She seriously will tell you she thinks those are the best restrooms that she's ever seen at any retail place, period. Things like that. Those really stand out. That draws people into a store. It's the travel center industry is always putting out new ideas on things.
Frank, I was just going to quickly add what you said was fascinating about kind of the change related to the reliance on fuel. And I think travel centers, I know they are uniquely positioned to take advantage of that change because they're kind of fuel agnostic in many ways. If the car's powered by peanut butter, electricity, or diesel, it still has to stop, right? They want to eat, they have to use the restroom, and they got to get some sort of fuel, whatever it may be. And we're certainly seeing that, different types of members NATSO has, the massive amounts of the big chain convenience stores that are entering this space. It's going to be a really exciting and interesting time for travel centers in the next 10 years because it's quickly changing.
And Darren, you actually bring up a good point, though. And I know we've talked about this before, but all right, I'll say something that is probably contested here, but I really don't think that the average convenience store is going to find much of a business case for EV charging, at least from what I can tell currently. I could be completely wrong on this, and I would love to be proven wrong.
Nope, you're right. I agree 100% with you. 100%.
The range on the current models is already like 5 to 7 times the average miles driven daily by Americans. Even if you forget to charge for a couple nights, you can still go charge at home again, or at work, or at the barbershop, the movie theater. Literally anyone can install a charger. But I think travel centers are actually uniquely positioned to be a place for people driving those vehicles, because if you're doing long distance travel, you got to stop somewhere. And a travel center that has that to keep those visits coming in and provides a very, very compelling reason to come inside the store or order food to it. There really might be something there. I don't think your average neighborhood convenience store is going to find much of a business case for it, but I could see a solid travel center. Like, I think of someone like Coffee Cup Travel Plaza in South Dakota. Like, I don't care what I'm driving, I'm probably going to stop there because that place is awesome. There's just no getting around it.
Absolutely. Now, does anybody know the time it takes to recharge an electric car?
Depends on the type of charger.
Yeah, I guess I had this discussion this morning at the local chamber in Lafayette, and somebody knew someone who had an electric car, and it takes them about 45 minutes to charge the car when they're on a trip. And a travel center, I mean, you can find something to do there for 45 minutes. And I think most people now, of course, I'm in the South, so people drive a lot more here in the South. I mean, people routinely drive an hour a day to go to work, but it's not like they're sitting in traffic waiting. They were literally driving on interstates and secondary roads. And so, I wonder how the electric cars down here are going to do because, and under Darren, I think you're in Texas sometimes, and man, that's a big old state. So I kind of wonder how that's going to be for the South. And I was thinking this morning, 45 minutes to charge a car. You're right. There's not a lot to do in a convenience store unless you really, redesign that place. But a travel center is sort of built for that. Go in, relax, do something. I could see where travel centers will lead the way there.
Yeah, to Frank's point, though, I think you have to be able to have something that offers a person to get out of that car. Because If you think about it, if you're in your $100,000 Tesla, you can watch Netflix. You're going to sit in that car unless there's a compelling reason to go into that store. So there's going to be travel centers that embrace that figure out ways to bring out food to those charging customers or to have compelling reasons for them to come inside. That's certainly going to happen. But if you don't have a compelling reason, I can tell you, I've observed hundreds, if not thousands, of charging customers over the last 3 to 4 years, taking thousands of pictures, and most of them, unfortunately, sit in their car because there isn't a compelling reason. Yeah, again, as Frank is spot on. You have to have a reason for that person to get out of the car. It's no different than today in a gas. If you think about it, if you pull up to a travel center that doesn't have a compelling reason for you to get out and spend money, you gas up, you go inside, use the restroom, and then you leave.
And One thing I would add to that too, Darren. I think half of the battle is just having a compelling offer is one thing, but a lot of people are never going to encounter it because there's sometimes a lack of communication, or the curb appeal in general just turns someone off from even going in to investigate. And I think that's something people are really going to have to be mindful moving forward. One thing I've noticed this year, I don't know if anyone else has picked up on this, but it's been really interesting to me with all the signage that's suddenly being put out around enhanced store safety measures, that companies with really high brand standards are literally resorting to ink jetting crumpled company statements and clip art graphics and things that look really cheap and just taping them around a store. I mean, I was in a store the other day. It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they've got probably 20 or 30 really cheap ink jetted things just taped all around the store. And it really sort of worked against their brand standards. I mean, not to plug what we're doing with Safe Shop, but just to point out that that's something we try to be mindful of. We went as far as looking at how to design our logo to be friendly and intuitive, what colors were being used. And that's a credit to the folks at Paragon Solutions for doing that. But, that's an issue. I don't want to speak for any female customers, but if I'm thinking of how my wife probably acts in retail environments, seeing it's bad enough to see a place that has all the signage about cigarettes and deals on soft drinks and, 30 different signs plastered all over the front of the store. But then you add these ink jetted company statements and things, and it just looks like a mess. To go back to Coffee Cup Travel Plaza, the curb appeal of that store is just astonishing. It's so good. I'm looking at a photo I took earlier this year when I was there. And I mean, they had their Christmas tree. This was from about a year ago. Their Christmas tree was stuck right in the center in this massive window above the logo. And it looked like a place you'd let kids walk in without supervision. It looked like that safe. Those are the kind of stores that I think are going to be successful in drawing in traffic from EV customers, because they look boutique, they look unique. It looks like something that has a store that has something for you inside.
Absolutely. And if you own a travel center, you manage one, I'm hoping that you stop at every travel center and look around. One of my favorite places is the Oasis Travel Plaza, or Oasis Travel Center in Roxdale, Alabama. That place is it's for kids of all ages. They have a big giant toy area in there. They have just everything. And that's one of the places, if I pulled up there, I would think I just want to go explore this place, because the exterior has a bunch of train cars that look like they crashed into it. It's called the Derailed Diner. And when you go in, it's an amazing dining area, but they have a specific area that's built like a vintage train dining car. And it is so cool. And I mean, you could walk around that place forever, especially if you got kids. Kids are going to love it. The checkout counter is like a crashed pirate ship broken in two. This place, it's kind of like a Disney World in there. I love it. And those are the kind of places that, they're fun to be in. So I could see plugging my electric car in and running in there and hanging out. Plus, they also have amazing fried fish.
Well, Al, speaking about Disney, Eddie World in California.
Uh-huh.
I love that. One of the quick trips who was going on a trip out there, flown out to Vegas and was driving to California. And the moment I saw that he was making that drive, I immediately posted on Facebook. I was like, hey, you did stop at Eddie World in Euremo, correct? He replies back and he's like, oh my God. He goes, I've never seen anything like this in my life. But places like that delight and create that positive impression. I mean, I've watched this just standing and observing customers at Buc-ee's locations. People will literally plan the route of their trip to coincide with these stores. If you can delight customers like that, it's amazing how much they'll go out of their way to come back.
Absolutely. And kids will make them go back if you kids will, if your child stops at the Oasis Travel Center in Roxdale, Alabama, they're gonna want to go back. It's just so cool. Heck, I want to go back. I make my wife crazy.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have them on the podcast, Oasis Travel Center.
Oh, I love those people. Great place. God, I love that place.
They're incredible.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. I have a few wacky questions for you, but first, tell people how they can listen to your podcast, the Inconvenience Podcast.
Go ahead, Frank.
Absolutely. So inconveniencepodcast.com. We're on basically anything that you can download a podcast on, iTunes, Spotify. We're about to drop our next batch of 10 episodes. Should be, well, since this is not time, well, it's probably out by the time you're listening to this, so make sure to go and check it out. You can find us both on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Al's on Facebook at Gas Station Gourmet. Al, you can tell them your other contact info. You can find me at safeshopassured.com. And, of course, check out Convenience Store Decisions.
Absolutely. And gasstationgourmet.com, we have a gas station vacation map. You can download that. It's a mobile optimized website, so you can download it to your home screen. Doesn't take up any data space. And you click on that, a map comes up, click on a knife and a fork. There's a little synopsis of the travel plaza or gas station. You click on directions, Google Maps will take you right there. And, you can have great gas station food whenever you're traveling. gasstationgourmet.com/map. Fun stuff.
Great. Okay. All right. Then right before we go, I like to ask a few wacky questions to send you out. All right. Well, Frank, go first and then Al. What is your go-to on the road snack?
Ooh, that's a great question, actually. All right. One thing I'll say that I think is just beyond, two things that are beyond delicious that I'm really hooked on right now. One is from Quest, the ones that do the protein bars. Their chocolate chip cookie has no business tasting that good. It may turn people off because it's low carb and it looks like a protein item that might taste like cardboard. Not true. It is disturbingly good. The other thing is Cliff has this salted caramel bar that's lower sugar. I don't know how they did it, but it tastes like Eggos with butter on it, and I could just eat those things all day. If you haven't tried it, try it. You're going to be hooked.
Okay, well, I'm a kind of a serious eater, and before I leave the state of Louisiana, especially Cajun country, I will stop someplace, mostly a Bourbon Street Deli or Rascals, which is a great travel plaza in Dusson, Louisiana, and get a bunch of boudin balls. Now, Darren has had boudin, but now what they do is they'll take it and they will form it into a ball, batter it, and of course, deep fry it. And as we all know, deep frying, that's really filling. And I'll get a bunch of those because one of those is really kind of a meal. And so I'll take those with me when I travel because they're just easy to eat. They're a convenient food to eat, delicious, and actually not that unhealthy for you if you get the ones at Rascals, because there's a dietitian that works for them. She makes sure all the food is both delicious and a little bit healthy.
Perfect. Okay. If you're stuck at a truck stop in a snowstorm, how do you pass the time? Frank.
Ooh, that's a good question. So if anyone has the answer for this, please contact me on LinkedIn because I'm seriously dying to know this. I have a strange, ironic obsession with things that are branded with wolves, and I don't know why truck stops always sell them. You would be surprised at the amount of wolf paraphernalia that I have purchased over the years, down to clothes, pillows, everything. It's completely ironic and tongue-in-cheek, but it's just tacky, and I love it. Every truck stop I go to, I go in and I look for the wolf stuff. And my sister has the same obsession with it. So typically I'm just buying them for her as joke gifts, but we both love it. I just love to go walk around the truck stops. Like, you just never know what you're going to find at a truck stop, down to just weird items for sale for your home to food you've never seen before. Like, I love that discovery element and I find it so much fun. So I guarantee I'll spend the whole time walking around the store.
How about you, Al?
Well, I know this about Frank with the wolf stuff because Frank and I have traveled together. I love that about Frank. Okay, because primarily I write a lot about the food end of the business. One of the first things I like to do, well, I first check out the restrooms and, of course, take photographs in there because I am that person that Frank talked about earlier. I am the guy who will go in a ladies' room. Frank has actually stood guard out there for me to take pictures because, we all live for that. But I spend my time, in the dining area eating because I want to try everything. And I spend some time talking to the waitresses and the staff because, when you talk to them, if they're enthusiastic, if they make eye contact, if they're energized, the food's going to be good because people just tend to be proud of what they serve. So I spend a lot of time in the dining area with the food, which is how I keep my weight up because I worry about sudden, unexpected weight loss.
All right. Do you prefer to drive or ride as a passenger, Frank?
Ooh, that's tricky. I'd say a couple of both, but it depends on the situation. So for example, my wife and I had to cancel our honeymoon to Japan this year because, COVID. And so I thought, like, come on, we got to go somewhere at least. So we found a Airbnb in South Dakota in the Black Hills, middle of nowhere. It was perfect. Just rented some cabin that someone owned. But now, I love to drive around a place like that. Al, I know, doesn't like all the hills and all the elevation because he was driving when we were going through Arizona. We were going into Scottsdale, and he just
froze up.
Froze up, gripping the wheel, hands are white. That was actually really entertaining. So in that case, I like driving. But normally, if the driving's interesting, I want to drive. If I'm driving through Western Kansas, I have no intention of driving. No. There's just nothing to do or look at.
Well, Frank is absolutely right. I am an enthusiastic driver, but not a very good one. So I am always interested in having someone else drive, and I am very afraid of heights. I live in South Louisiana. We're kind of below sea level here. So when I get around hills and mountains, I really do freeze up, and I don't know how you people do that. So, it's always better for everyone on the road if I'm just the passenger eating boudin balls across America.
Do you have like a little car or a big car? Or is it more the rental cars that are a problem?
Well, for me, I have a van because you never know when you're going to need to transport a 4x8 sheet of plywood.
Okay.
And so I am prepared. So that's why I have a large Toyota van just in case someone calls and needs a 4x8 sheet of plywood.
All right. 2 more. How do you take your truck stop coffee?
Ooh, so I'm not like a coffee snob, but my consumption habits are probably coffee snob consumption habits. I just do pour overs at home and buy kind of boutique blends and stuff, single origin. So I just go in and get it plain. I mean, I think you ruin coffee when you start adding things to it, and just get regular drip coffee black. Yeah, you don't need to do anything to it.
I love truck stop coffee, and I loved it when I walked into a travel plaza not far from where I live, and they had the cream bar. Oh my God, I went nuts for that because I love putting cream in coffee. And so because I am health conscious, as Frank knows, I will put sweet and low and then a ton of cream in it.
Okay, and we're going to end with a controversial question, which is it a truck stop, travel center, or travel plaza?
Yeah, so that's controversial and somewhat loaded. Now, I would say it this way. I love truck stops, but I know that name carries a certain stigma with certain consumers. I feel just like the C-store industry is trying to move away from the term gas station. I think it's in the best interest to brand stores as travel centers or travel plazas. Travel plaza is probably a little better, but it's just you've got some customers out there that have those silly stigmas. But I'm good either way. If I see a place that's large and on the side of the road with a huge fuel canopy, I'm probably going to stop and go in there whether I need to or not.
How about you, Al?
Well, I love them both. I will stop at places that look really sketchy because I used to be a cop and I love the danger, but I also know there could be great food in there. And I have found great food in places where most people would never go into. And those had on the sign, they said truck stop. I kind of go with whatever the people like to call it. Some people call them truck stops if they own them. And some people like to be called travel centers or travel plazas. Some places really do live up to that plaza center name, like, again, I go back to Oasis, but some are very small and kind of rough on the exterior and the interior, and those are definitely truck stops, but they all have character, and that's kind of what I look for in writing about the small individually owned places. Is I love the character of the place, but I also love the characters of the people behind the counter. They're great.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to today's episode of the Truck Stops Here. You can find us online at natso.com/podcast. You can listen to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher. And we hope if you have any questions or you want any guests on the podcast, or reach out to editor@natso.com.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by NATSO, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by NATSO in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.